This week on the WriterCon podcast.
Yeah, there's no substitute for, I think, practicing your craft and doing your craft, and also seeing how the craft is done by other writers.
Welcome to WriterCon, a gathering place for writers to share their knowledge about writing and the writing world. Your hosts are William Bernhardt, best-selling novelist and author of the Red Sneaker books on writing, and Laura Bernhardt, award-winning author of the Wantland Files book series.
Thank you, Jesse Ulrich. And hey there, writers. Thanks for joining us. So, this episode is being released the weekend before Laura and I travel to Canebrake, just outside Tulsa, for the WriterCon retreat. I know we've talked about what we do, that the feedback and the talks and the time to write and whip your manuscript into shape before WriterCon conference happens so you can pitch it to the agents, but there is so much more that goes on at these retreats. You meet people, you get to know people, make friends for life, you get beta readers you'll keep for life. And so many. Laura, you remember the year? And I think this was the COVID lockdown year. So we're all sitting around in masks and distancing itself at the retreat. And Marcia Preston, who's a terrific writer, was there. She's won the Mary Higgins Clark Award, for Pete's sake. But she was... I don't remember the point, stuck somewhere in her novel, but on day 5, she said, "Thank you to the whole group. You gave me exactly what I need." And indeed, that novel has now been published by a Big 5 publisher, and she is doing really well with it. You have a favorite memory from the retreats?
That was a good one. That's when we were at Eureka Springs. What I really like about this one that's coming up is we're going to be in a new place.
Yep.
And
Gorgeous.
I'm excited to explore that. Yes, different. It's always fun to go explore, try out different things. I know we're going to be welcoming in some writers who are going to be new to WriterCon, and I'm excited to meet them, start working with them. We are going to have, we're getting close to filling up, I think. We have room, there's room, but on the other hand, we keep it small enough that we can adapt. So wherever you are in your writing, we can help you out. If you're just starting, I had someone send me a message and ask me, I have all these ideas, but I don't know where to start. Are you guys going to be too advanced for someone in my position? I need to know how to structure a novel. Are we going to be talking about things like that? We can adapt to help anybody at any level because we keep them smaller. So you get really intense, useful instruction, actionable advice, feedback from people, and you're going to hear from people at all different levels. So it's really invaluable.
Never in a confrontational or any way that would make
but if you're just beginning, you'll hear from people who are maybe on their 5th draft or people who've maybe even published once before. And so it'll allow you to look ahead and plant some ideas and start getting your ducks in a row for further down the line and give you an idea what to expect later in your process.
Right. And Jesse, you're still welcome to drop by if you decide to drop that boring teaching teens leadership thing or whatever that was.
Listen, I would love...
Of course, nothing's more important than the retreat. So
I would happily come. Again, as listeners of this podcast know, I've always enjoyed and being around people who are working on a creative project and being supported in that by other creative people. Like, it's fun no matter what it is. And so any WriterCon cruise, retreat, conference, whatever is always enjoyable. Even if you're not necessarily a writer, it's just a great way to feel supported in whatever creative endeavor you're doing.
It's a great vibe.
Absolutely. All right, WriterCon retreat, last chance. You won't hear about it on the next podcast because it will be over. So if you're interested, go to writercon.com/retreat and check it out. Our interview today is with Marc Guggenheim, who is an Emmy Award-winning writer. He's written for many different media, including television, film, video games, comic books, and now he has written his first book, which is called In Any Lifetime. We'll talk to him about all of that cool stuff later. But first, the news. All right, first news story confronts a key issue involving agent-client privacy or confidentiality. This caught my attention because I thought this was not in controversy. I thought this was an accepted fact, but here we got people discussing it. This controversy arose on social media, of course, where else? When a literary agent named Hillary Harwell tweeted that she wanted to see a novel similar to a query she just rejected. I think Jesse's got the tweet up on the screen for those of you watching this on YouTube. So just to be clear, she read the query, she kind of liked the concept, but not the execution. So she basically tweeted asking other people to write the idea, except write it better for her. Well, as you might imagine, this appalled a few people in this book thread, accusing her of basically stealing the author's original idea. And in the wake, she was actually let go from her agency, the KT Literary. I mean, like I said, this has never arisen before to my knowledge because it seems so obvious. Queries should be confidential, but even if, you might talk about dinner, but you heard, well, here's a pitch from somebody, you're not going to go around and ask people to to take somebody's idea and ask somebody else trying to write it. I don't know. This just seems like an egregious error in judgment. Laura, you were the one who brought this story to my attention. What do you think about it?
Well, I brought it to your attention because it bothered me so much. How many times do we, in our retreats, talk to people and reassure them it's okay when you're pitching an agent. Right. You don't have to hold back. You don't have to keep things secret. It's okay to send your manuscript around. It will be kept confidential. We absolutely expect, at a bare minimum, that level of trust. I don't know if the agent thought they were being funny or clever. I don't really know what would have prompted that to happen, because I can't imagine doing that. I mean, I've sat through pitch sessions before, and I would just never, ever go away. You tell people during our retreats, we don't go share ideas on social media.
How many times at the retreats has it come up? Because unpublished authors sometimes tend to be a little excessively paranoid that somebody's going to steal their idea. And I always say, you can't protect an idea anyway. It's not the idea, it's what you do with it that matters. But I still don't think an agent should be posting other people's ideas.
And I think this agent came back and said, well, the execution was terrible. There's no way I was going to have this person write it. Because people were asking in the thread of comments, why didn't you just ask for changes from that author? Well, the agent clearly didn't think that author was up to doing it. But again, I don't think I don't like it. I think it was not a good course of action.
I mean, just to be a lawyer, you can't own an idea. You can sue someone for stealing your idea. You could steal them for plagiarism or for stealing more, but not just that. I don't know, Jesse, what do you think about this?
It's just like there are some, you just like, I don't know. This feels wrong.
Yeah.
It feels wrong. It feels like taking someone's idea and be like, hey, can someone write a slightly different version of this? So like you're taking someone's, not intellectual property, but like, I don't know, creative nexus. And being like, I don't want that from you. I want it from somebody else.
Well, we
creatives have to get each other, we have to have each other's backs. We're supposed to support each other.
Well, we've got more than a dozen agents and editors coming to WriterCon this fall. And they're all people I know, all people I like and trust and think are professional, but Never in all the years that we've done this conference have I said, and by the way, don't be posting other people's idea on social
Yeah.
media. I
Because you
did
would
not think
expect
that
not
was
me.
necessary.
No, exactly.
Well, I'll put that into the briefings now, I guess. Okay, news story number 2 is about a young woman named Emily Henry, who was featured in a great piece in the New York Times just a couple days ago as we record this, because she has hit the bestseller now 5 times, 5 consecutive romance novels. That's not the remarkable part, as if that weren't extraordinary enough. What's remarkable is she did it with no book tours, no book signing, and no TikTok. And that's the main the main focus of the story, is that she managed to write and publish 5 very popular books without, as she says, leaving her comfort zone. And I thought, wow, this is my kind of writer. But I don't think it's just me. Writers, tend to be introverts. That's why they're writers. They'd rather be reading at the library than at some discotheque or whatever. But I think they're sometimes surprised, even when they're traditionally published, surprised at how much they must get involved in the promotion process. And I might add that Emily Henry now not only has all these bestsellers, she's got a movie on Netflix based on her book called Happy Place. So, Laura, could anybody else do this, or was she just phenomenally lucky? What do you think?
I do think when it comes to book sales and book success, I do think there's always an element of luck. I'm super happy for her, and it's encouraging to me to hear that she didn't do something on TikTok that helped her strike out. It's refreshing to me to hear that. I'm getting old enough that it's getting harder and harder for me to learn new things and squeeze more into my days. I'm stretched so thin already.
Well, I don't want to seem like go ahead.
She has to have written really good books, or at least they're appealing to her audience, so they must be well written.
Yeah, I just don't want it to seem like I'm encouraging people to not do promotion for their books, because most people should.
Yes.
Whether they're indie or traditionally published. But I do kind of love the fact that she managed to, and it's not that she was being rude or superior, as she says, I just don't like doing that kind of stuff, so I'm not going to. And
she says she didn't leave her comfort zone, so she must have been doing things that she was okay with doing.
What did she do?
Books. Yeah, what did she do?
What did she do?
She wrote some really good books, apparently, because a lot of people are liking on them.
Yeah, but lots of people write really good books that aren't successes.
Right,
So
that don't catch on.
I mean,
we heard what she didn't do. Jesse's got a valid point.
Write a romance novel. That's the next thing.
All right.
So, Jesse, I'm thinking, after you finish that Sugar Kink novel you've been working on, this might be an option, because you probably don't want to go to book signings and explain that you're...
I would love to go to book signings. Like all the things that writers don't want to do, I would do. And I should put my services out there. Be like, you write the book, I will go out and talk about your book.
Yeah, will you be me and go on tour?
Yeah,
and I'll stay home and watch TCM. It's perfect. I like it.
Yeah.
All right, Jesse, cue up that music and let's talk to Marc Guggenheim. Marc, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me.
All right, here's our usual first question. If you could offer writers one piece of advice, what would it be?
Well, I often give the following as my one piece of advice. And it's really 2 pieces of advice, but it belongs together, which is read a lot and write a lot. I really don't think
great advice.
Thank you. Yeah, there's no substitute for, I think, practicing your craft and doing your craft, and also seeing how the craft is done by other writers. And I think you learn as much from the good things as you do from the bad, and vice versa.
Absolutely. You got a new book out.
Yeah.
In Any Lifetime. Tell us about that.
Well, it's a sort of a multiversal romance. It's about a quantum physicist whose wife is killed in a tragic accident, and he is trying to find the one parallel universe where she's still alive.
Aw,
Yeah. So
that's
Mhm.
sweet.
it's got like it's a little Michael Crichton meets Time
Mhm.
Traveler's Wife. And
Nice.
what's kind of fun about it is it takes place in two time periods. In the present day, we're telling the story of Jonas, the protagonist's efforts to find his wife, but in throughout the book, we're flashing back to their meeting, their courtship, their
Mhm.
romance, their eventual marriage. So it's got a little bit of everything for everybody.
So this is a science fiction novel, would it be fair to say?
I think,
Or
yeah, sci-fi romance, I
I
guess
mean, they
is
never called Crichton science fiction, but he was, and
absolutely. Well,
at least most
what
of the
I
time.
so admire about Crichton's body of work is he did some things that were sci-fi, and then he did other things that were not sci-fi at all. He did some historical fiction. He did,
Mhm.
Rising Sun is a murder mystery set in the present day. He did it all. He was really a Renaissance author, as it were,
Mhm.
and I admire that.
Now, what are you doing? Because would it be fair to say this is not the first multi-universe or parallel or whatever? I mean, I got an Uncle Scrooge comic the other day where Scrooge is going through
Yes,
infinite universes, for
by
Pete's sake.
written by Jason Aaron, who's one of my
That's
favorite writers.
right.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
what have you done to make this
That's
concept
impressive.
fresh in this novel?
Well, I mean, basically, by revealing that in my version of the multiverse, there's only one universe where his wife is still alive, and that's sort of
Oh,
the polar opposite
brilliant.
to. Thank you. It's a 180 from what you typically see in multiverses, which is, there's 20 million variations on Person
Mhm.
X, and this is the exact opposite. And what is a big component of the book is the idea that the universe actually favors certain outcomes. So while there may be an infinite number of worlds, they're not infinitely different. And when we say that it favors certain outcomes, we essentially already sort of adopt that viewpoint ourselves. We call it fate. We call it destiny.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, in many respects, the multiverse itself is the antagonist of the book. The multiverse is trying to stop Jonas, the protagonist, from finding his wife.
Hmm.
So, it throws a variety of different obstacles in our hero's way, such as a rival scientist and even another woman. But the bad guy is the multiverse itself.
Well, I'm in. I need to read it. It sounds good.
I hope you like it. I hope you like it.
I bet I will.
I've been having
On
fun with it.
our last podcast, we talked with a lawyer writer who practiced for more than 35 years and is now transitioned into writing full time. But you went the other route. You practiced for 4 years.
Yeah,
Is that
correct.
right? And then
That's
you
right.
left to work in television. How
Yes.
did that happen? How did you stumble across that opportunity?
Well, it's funny. I used to be a litigator, and I kind of joke that if I didn't practice law, the only job I could get was as a television writer. Because when I left the practice of law, I knew I wanted to work in television, but I moved out to California without any job in place, and I took interviews for jobs, non-lawyer jobs, but also non-television jobs, just to be able to pay the rent. And it was amazing how nobody wanted to hire me. And I still,
Ouch.
yeah, it was painful, but it was like it's funny, if you're a transactional attorney, the world is your oyster. You can do anything. You can be a
Right.
CEO, a CFO, a CTO, doesn't matter. But if you're a litigator, people only want you to sue people. Or write television, as it turns out. So that worked out reasonably well for me.
So you didn't stumble onto it. You worked very hard to try to get a job
Oh,
writing for television.
Oh yeah, I had been writing on the side since my third year of law school, and
Okay.
I would write while I was practicing law, and really sort of developing my craft. And to work in television, it's a lot like other fields of writing where you really have to develop your skill set. I
Mhm.
think before you're ready to do it for real. And I would write on the side while I was practicing, and I would take my vacation time and spend it out in Los Angeles, meeting with producers and writers and studios and whatnot. So there was like that 4 to 5 year period was really sort of spent not just practicing law, but also trying to become a writer.
Hmm.
Okay. And
Hmm.
then did you like working in television?
Oh, I loved it. I still work in television. It was wonderful. I mean, truth be told, like practicing law is, it's a very stressful job. It's
Hmm.
not a wonderful way to make a living. And as a litigator, you're basically fighting with people every day.
See, that would
And
be I think that's how I would feel about it. I know people who love it. I know some attorneys who are all about it, but I don't know that
yeah,
it would fit my personality.
I found it exhausting.
Mhm.
And I also, quite frankly, I practiced with some very, very talented attorneys, and I think I was an okay attorney. I think I had some game, but I would look at the partners above me who had a lot more experience, and I knew innately that there was a ceiling for me, that I would never be as good as they were. And I found it very sort of frustrating to be in a job that I couldn't do at the highest level.
Mm.
And for whatever reason, I sort of felt an instinct like I could maybe do that in television. The
Yeah.
bar is set much lower in television, which helps enormously.
Hmm. Now, I have to bring this up because I know that one way or another, you have worked in numerous top dollar franchises like Star Wars, like Star Trek, like Planet of the Apes.
Yeah.
How did all this come about?
Um, a lot of luck and really the result, quite frankly, of just doing this job for a long time. I've been
Mhm.
writing professionally for 24 years, and I was, about 20 years ago, I broke into comics and started writing movies as well. And if you just sort of work in all these different areas, eventually some opportunities get to come your way. So, like for example, Star Wars happened because of relationships I made both through DC Comics and through the editor of the Star Wars line, who was my previous editor on an X-Men book that I wrote for Marvel. So a lot of it's just building the relationships, and eventually you get some offers for gigs. Planet of the Apes was funny. Planet of the Apes was just an email. I got an email from Marvel one day
Mhm.
saying, "Hey, would you have any interest?" And I was absolutely.
Oh, wow.
Wow, you're on
Yeah,
the
so
A
That's
list.
nice. Yeah.
yeah, so it varies. It definitely varies. I kind of found over the course of my career that the the you can go out and sort of pitch yourself, for
Hmm.
gigs, but generally speaking, the gigs I've all gotten are their incoming phone calls. They're basically like, someone is either, knows me from another thing, or they've heard of me and they reach out
Hmm.
through various different ways and say, "Hey, would you like to do this?" And I always say I work for 10-year-old me. If 10-year-old me thinks it would be a great idea, then that's what I do.
What could be a better job than that?
Well,
I'm,
again, it goes back to Laura's question about, practicing law.
mhm.
My worst day as an attorney my worst day as a writer is still better than my best day as an attorney.
There you
Mhm.
go. Can you talk a little bit about how writing for comic books differs from, say, writing for television or now writing a novel?
They all exist along a spectrum of
Mhm.
intimacy.
Mm.
When I'm writing a TV show, I'm writing a script that's going to be in the hands of like 100 people, sometimes 200 people. Anywhere from studio executives to the gaffer on the set. Um, and that's a document for a very, specific audience, and it's a document that it's a document that is how do I sort of put this? Being collaborate the basis for a collaboration with 100 to 200 people. In comics, it's a document for essentially like 5 people. It's a document for myself, sort of the artist, the colorist, the letterer,
Mhm.
and the editor. And a novel, and that and that audience is pretty much the people. It's only 5 people actually making the thing. And then on the novel, you have the exact opposite side of the equation,
Right.
which is it's a document that is at first is only for me, but the end product also is only done by me. I mean, yes, there's editors and people involved, but fundamentally, it's a much more intimate
Right.
connection with
It's
the
just
audience
you. Yeah.
because they're seeing my actual words as opposed to screenplays and comic book scripts. The audience is not seeing my words. They're seeing,
Mm-hmm.
what either the comic book artist generates or what the director and actors do on the screen.
Mm.
So to me, it's a question of intimacy.
Hmm. And speaking of comic books, I couldn't help but notice that this new book of yours has a endorsement from Brad Meltzer,
Yes,
who I also know, and the audience will know not just from his novels, but of course also great comic book work, and the guy who helped save the Superman house.
that's right.
So how
Brad
can
is
that?
the salt of the earth. I have I
Yeah,
have I have to tell you he's just the greatest guy. Can I tell you a quick funny Brad
please
story?
do.
So I met Brad working on a show called Jack and Bobby. Jack and Bobby was a show
I
that Brad
remember. Hmm.
created about a kid who and is going to become the president of the United States in the future.
Mm.
And during my work on that show, I happened to get my first comic book writing gig. It was writing a 2-issue story of Aquaman,
Hmm.
and I had been reading comic books my whole life, and I had my outline, and it never occurred to me that I would have a problem writing a comic book. And I sit down in my office, and I'm like, okay, Ray, here we go. And oh my God, I have no idea how to write a comic book. I've never done it before, and I have no idea what I'm doing. So
Yeah.
I ran down the hall to basically beg Brad to teach me how to write comics, and he was incredibly gracious as he's wont to be, and gave me tips that I still use today.
Sweet.
And he's just the warmest, most generous of souls.
Aw.
Hmm.
Very nice. So, what brought you to writing books
Well,
or novels? I suppose I should say novel.
I've always loved reading. I've always been a fan of books. Like I said, I work for 10-year-old me. If 10-year-old
Mhm.
me
Hmm.
thinks it's
Hmm.
cool, then it's something I want to do. I had written a book in 2017 that was sort of like a legal thriller, sort of relying on my background, and I enjoyed it. The thing is, as you know, writing a novel takes a lot of time. Um, and when I'm running shows in particular and I'm in production on something, that usually takes up all my time. Um,
I get that.
so yeah, so it's just there's only so many hours in the day. Basically what happened was I had been playing around with this story for about 10 years in various forms. I explored doing it as a graphic novel. I explored doing it as a screenplay. But I never had time to do what it really needed to be, which was a novel, until the pandemic. The pandemic hit, and suddenly production is shut down, and I have a lot more time on my hands than I did.
We've
And
kind of heard that as a common theme lately, that a lot of
yeah,
people use that to their benefit. It was a rough time for everyone, but we got some books written, by gosh.
I tell you, it was a rough time, but in many ways, it was exactly kind of what I needed. 2019 was an incredibly busy time for me. I was running multiple shows. I was working in Vancouver and Prague, and spent no time with my family. And
Mm.
the irony of being a showrunner, and this is a quality problem. I don't mean to complain about it, but like the irony of being a showrunner is that you get into being a showrunner by being a writer, and the higher you sort of get up in the television hierarchy, the less time you have to write.
Aw.
So for me, the pandemic was a wonderful opportunity to revisit both my family and just the pure act of writing.
Yeah. WriterCon has a newsletter and magazine that we send out by Substack, but you're on Substack too. I saw it just
Yeah,
this morning. You've got Legal Dispatch, right?
Legal Dispatch.
Tell us
Yes.
about that, please.
Yeah, it's my semi-weekly newsletter.
Yeah,
I try
I
to
know
publish
that feeling.
I try to publish every Friday. I'm not always great about it. Like I missed this week. But basically, what it is it's sort of an amalgam of different things. It's I'm updating people on the work I'm doing right now, the work that's coming out. I'll go back into sort of the archives and try to show some behind the scenes material from the various shows I've worked on. When I feel like I've got something valuable to say, I'll comment either on politics or on writing. Usually it's more writing than politics.
Mhm.
I try to always include some bit of advice, some bit of observation that I found helpful to me that may be helpful to other people, that can sometimes spark a discussion and sometimes just be like, hey, listen, this is the little you know trick or hack or thing that I've stumbled upon in my now almost 30 years doing writing, um, that maybe is helpful to other people. I'll give an example. I wrote a piece about what it takes to write a good writing sample for television.
Mhm.
Because I feel like a lot of writers these days just go about it in the completely wrong way.
Mm.
Um, and it's usually my pieces of advice are really simple and kind of axiomatic, but
Mhm.
axiomatic in a way that no one's really thought about before. And the essence of that piece of advice was you have to write with your audience in mind, which again is the most
Mm.
axiomatic thing in the world. But you'd be shocked at how many, especially emerging writers, don't write a sample thinking about who's actually going to read it. They just write a sample. And usually
Mhm.
it's a sample that they're doing to impress themselves or impress at most their agents, but without any sort of regard to the type of showrunner or the type of producer who's actually going to be reading the sample and evaluating whether or not they want to take a meeting with that writer. So I think providing some of those perspective shifts is part of what I try to do in the newsletter.
Sure.
That's really good advice. That applies to us as well. We're told writing genre fiction, you need to write with your ideal audience in mind. I've heard that
Yeah.
before, which it does make you think a little bit differently. Is my audience going to like this, or do I just think this is clever and fun? Think
You
about
know, I feel like writing is it I always say good writing is an act of empathy.
Mhm.
You have to not just place yourself in the shoes of these fictional characters, but you have to place yourself in the shoes of another person, the person who's going to be reading it.
Mhm.
And part of that is for the purposes of telling the story, but also part of that is just for the purposes of getting your reader to understand the story. If you're so insular or sort of narcissistic in your writing, you're going to end up writing something that other people just can't understand.
Mhm.
I always say like writing a comic book script is actually the most empathetic form of writing because in that case, you're writing for someone specifically to bring the thing to life.
Mhm.
And you can't ask them to draw things that are physically impossible to draw. But no matter how talented the artist is,
Right.
they can't draw like two actions in the same panel. So I always say like you've got to write with the idea of you not being the person reading the thing.
Very
That's really
good.
good. That's great perspective.
Yeah.
So you've talked a little bit about this, but maybe you can expand on what a typical writing day looks like for you, what your process is when you're actually writing. So maybe thinking about the novel, how did you write that while you were working on it?
Yeah, basically, well, it's funny. I don't ever have a typical writing day because, with the novel aside, I generally speaking am working on more than one thing at a time. And it's really about sort of triage and which deadlines are coming up
Mhm.
when. But but this is true sort of regardless, and it was true for when I was writing the novel. I will generally speaking be at the keyboard, between 9 and 10 in the morning.
Mhm.
um, if I have the time, I'll start off like spending about a half hour or an hour returning emails.
Mhm.
I do feel sometimes, and I think most people feel this way, like I could probably spend the entire day returning emails
It's
and,
inundating. I
and
get
not,
that.
yeah, and still have a full inbox by the end of the day.
Mhm.
But I try to like spend half an hour to an hour to get at the most sort of time sensitive ones, and then I kind of just start going. If I have normally I have like some sort of outline or some sort of set of notes to work off of. But if I'm having trouble starting, what I'll typically do is I'll read or play what I call a tuning fork, where I will sort of consume in some version of media about 5 minutes worth of something that's akin to what I am chasing as a writer.
Yeah.
And the way I sort of describe it is like if you watch a cooking show, you're going to get hungry. And
Yes.
it's like I think also seeing someone do something well makes you want to do that same thing well.
I agree. I like to immerse myself in reading what I'm trying to write when I'm writing it. I get that.
Exactly. So I'll do that, and that's usually enough to get me going.
Nice.
And then I just go. I don't believe in writer's block. I believe when you write professionally, you have to be a professional. And the professionals know that the muse doesn't show up to work every day,
Right.
and you have to kind of figure out how to work past that stuff. And so it's not to say that every day is easy. Most days are not easy.
Right.
But those days when you are in the zone, I think every writer will tell you those are the days you write
the
for.
best.
It's
Yes.
the best feeling. So I'll typically do that, and then depending upon what else is sort of going on, I'll like end that batch of writing around 3 to 5 p.m.
Okay.
And then catch up on again all the texts that have come in, all the emails, phone calls.
Clearing out all the junk. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. I used to go from like project to project to project within a given day, and lately, I would say pretty much since the pandemic, I've sort of shifted that to no, this day is the day that's dedicated to project X, and then tomorrow will be dedicated to project Y.
Okay.
It really does vary. It's hard to sort of. I aspire to have a routine. I'm jealous of writers who have a routine. But because I do so many different things in so many different mediums with so many different kinds of deadlines and deliverables, it sort of frustrates my ability to have a proper routine.
Well, one last question for you, Mark. We've got so many irons in the fire. What should and we've got this book now, what can we look forward to reading from you in the future?
Well, let's see. So In Any Lifetime comes out August 1st.
Okay.
I think also later in that month is the collection of my Planet of the Apes run, which is called Beware the Planet of the Apes.
Oh,
That'll be out
sweet.
trade paperback. It's a lot of fun. One thing that I did that I'm very excited by is it's a prequel to the original Planet of the Apes movie, but I utilized the art from Marvel Comics back in the 70s had a run called Adventures on the Planet of the Apes, where it's basically an adaptation of the first two movies. So we actually use actual panels and pages from that series to help tell our story.
Oh, that's sweet.
So that's a lot of fun. It's funny. So much of my workload is kind of like it's like an iceberg where the vast majority of it is under the waterline. So there's stuff that I hasn't been announced that I can't talk about. Probably the only other thing I can sort of say to expect from me is I am working on a new Star Wars comic that hasn't been announced yet, so I can't talk about it. But it's in the works right now. I'm literally writing it before and after we do this podcast, and it's a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to.
Sounds great. Can't wait for that.
Thanks
for being on the podcast, Mark. Appreciate it.
Thank you both.
All right, we already talked about the WriterCon retreat, which is happening later this week. So let me remind you about the even bigger event, our annual celebration, the WriterCon Conference, which is Labor Day weekend every year. This year, that's August 30th. No, yeah, August 30th through September 2nd. We are now, as of yesterday, up to 70 speakers at this conference, more than 90 sessions. As I already said, more than a dozen agents and editors and publishers. We add more every week. We've got 13 contest categories. And, some people think entering competitions is a really good way to end up getting published. We've heard that in the interviews. We got free if you've paid to attend the conference, buffet lunches, and all kinds of learning opportunities. Visit the website, writercon.com, to learn more about it. And I'm also going to remind you that I got a new book out, Justice for All, the 8th Daniel Pike book is now on sale. All right? Until next time, keep writing. And remember, you cannot fail if you refuse to quit. See you next time.